Hello and welcome to Social Studies. Today we are talking about the age of exploration. Um, and let's just get on with it. I think depending on which class you're in, where we left off, we were talking about a little bit about Europe before the age of exploration during the medieval times or the Dark Ages or the Middle Ages or the age of feudalism, whatever you want to call it, when after the fall of the Roman Empire and lots of invasions coming in, and Europe was really not a safe place. Europe divided itself up into a bunch of small kingdoms. And in these kingdoms, the peasants would all of the feudalism systems were kind of the same. Peasants would work long hours, harsh lives, very poor lives, very little education, very little luxury, pretty miserable lives, all so that they could pay taxes and give their food, etc., to the monarchy, their king or queen, who in exchange would offer protection in the form of like the knights of the round table and other soldiers to defend them and their villages from outside invaders. And this is how most people lived in Europe for hundreds and hundreds of years. And there was very little education. A lot of the stuff that had existed under the Roman Empire, like interacting with the rest of the world, at least the known world around the Mediterranean Sea and trading with them, and a lot of the knowledge that they had gained over the years kind of slipped away for most Europeans. And they became sort of just um, and living these lives just within their local communities and not really knowing much or caring much about the outside world. This was the social structure we had with most people down here being peasants. I really wish this thing didn't always pop up when you went down on the bottom of the screen, but there it is. Peasants, where that dot is. Up here, you have up the top the monarchy, meaning king or queen. The nobles, these would be people who are friends and family of the king and queen, the lords, the ladies, the dukes, the duchesses, depending on where you are. Then you have the knights and the vassals. Up at the top of all of this social structure is the Pope. The Pope is the head of the Roman Catholic Church. Under the Roman Empire, Roman Catholicism was the official religion, and Christianity really at that time, if all Christians were Catholic, they were the same thing. There was really no other major Christian religions other than Catholic. Now, what that has to do with anything is that this isolated life the Europeans were leading begins to change a little bit during the 1200s, or well, the thousands, the 1100s, the 1200s. You can see during a bunch of religious wars known as the Crusades, when soldiers ventured across along the old route of the Roman Empire to the Middle East, which was Islamic territory. The Middle East over here, the Holy Land, Jerusalem, had been taken over by Muslims, and the Pope and Catholic Church for hundreds of years thought it was their obligation to win this land back for Christianity. So they fought a series of wars, sending soldiers over um, to the Holy Land, to the Middle East. And what results from that is that these Europeans who had never left their villages become more aware of the rest of the world. They come over here and they realize, whoa, in other parts of the world, like Asia, um, they have silk, very fine silks, cloth, and spices, which is delicious. Well, maybe not delicious, but it helps preserve the food. Remember, most people, their food, they had no refrigeration or anything. So they were eating a lot of spoiled meat and foods that really did not taste very well, probably. There wasn't a lot of variety. Spices helped preserve the food, made things taste tasty and delicious. And everybody likes silks and spices and all those things nices. So they wanted to they learned about these things. They learned they had better technology over here. And when they go back, they take things with them. The local villagers find out about it. They want some. And eventually they begin to trade back and forth along here, what becomes known as the Silk Road. So just to catch up in the notes here, if you did not have this, you can pause here and fill in the top part. Starting in 1492, this is all going to change. Before the Age of Exploration, Let me just make sure we've covered all of this. Middle Ages or medieval times, feudalism. Europe was mostly isolated, lacked knowledge and curiosity beyond their own kingdoms. They also lacked the ability to or desire to explore the world. They just didn't have the technology to venture out into the great ocean sea, as they called the Atlantic Ocean. They would have been lost at sea had they done that, and probably lots of people were that we don't know about. By the 1400s, that begins to change, partially due to the Crusades. Now, there had been other explorers, maybe not as well known as Columbus, but maybe having better games named after them, better pool games, such as Marco. I bet that you just said Polo. Marco Polo. You can see he traveled, he spent years of his life traveling, 24 years traveling all over Asia, and he writes a book and returns to Europe and describes it. Now, the thing is, very few people had books or read at that time, so his voyage, his travels didn't become super well known, but they did become well known enough so that people started realizing, whoa, there's this magical place, which they called the Orient sometimes, but China, India, Japan, the Spice Islands, there's these other parts of the world that Europeans become very fascinated by, that they barely even knew he was out there before. Um, Another famous traveler or explorer was a guy from Africa, Ibn Battuta, who had traveled all over Africa and Asia in the 1200s or the 1100s. I'm sorry. How would that disappear? Oh, I'm sorry. I was way off. The 1300s. Yeah, if I had stopped and thought about that, I would have known that. I'm sorry. My mistake. Um, he's another traveler that becomes not well known, but known to some educated people, such as Columbus, for example. Trade routes develop between Europe and Asia. They start to travel. There starts to be trade again along the Mediterranean, and this becomes and beyond. Over here are the Spice Islands that we don't know exactly what they meant by that, but Europeans became very fascinated by the Spice Islands. These were these islands where spices came from. Um, and these trade routes developed called the Silk Road. Now, the Silk Road was not just one road and it wasn't one trade route. What would happen was like that if you wanted some spices, you'd go to your local spice dealer who would have some spices to sell you. Now, that spice dealer didn't really know where those spices came from. He just knows he got them from his spice dealer, who got them from another spice dealer, who got them from maybe a spice wholesaler, who got them from a trader, who got them from another trader. So these things would change hands many, many times along the way, each one increasing the price a little bit, each one adding a little more mystery to the origins of them, where they came from. So they all just know that they came from the Spice Islands, which were somewhere near China, India, Japan, that part of the world. Now, trade did travel along the Mediterranean sometimes, but what ends up happening is that the Islamic kingdoms get control over a lot of these trade routes and they start charging fees or taxes. So people are becoming more interested in finding a better way to travel there, ideally by sea, because if they could travel there by sea, they could go directly to the Spice Islands and cut out all of the middle people who are charging their fees, and they could carry a lot more than somebody on with a few bags on a camel could carry. They could load up whole ships full of spices. Now that brings us to this guy. Who is this guy? If you said Christopher Columbus, you are maybe right. That is the intention, that this was Christopher Columbus. The thing is, we don't know. This is the a well-known painting of Christopher Columbus, but this was painted many years after after Christopher Columbus died, by someone who had never actually seen him. This is based on written accounts of him. We don't know if this is what he looks like or not, but there was no photography back then. There's no known paintings of him that were made during his lifetime, no primary sources, if you will. So we'll just go with this. What he looks like isn't super important, I guess. We don't judge people by their appearances. The good lesson for seventh grade. We'll talk about that a lot this year. So before a few 1492 and 1492 is a year you should memorize. In 1492, Columbus sails the ocean blue. But before that, a few people had traveled and explored. For example, Marco Polo, Ibn Battuta, um, the Vikings, we'll talk about in 1 second. And most educated Europeans knew the world was round, although they underestimated how large it was, which we'll talk about in a minute. That brings us to the Vikings. So Columbus, lots of people think, discovered America. First, at least the first European to sail to America. Well, 500 years before Columbus. 500 years is a long time. We talked about the United States is not even quite 250 years old. Double that. That's how long ago we're talking. 500 years before Columbus. Some sailors from the Scandinavia, Northern Europe up here who traveled, they were called the Vikings. They were, you know, they had traveled by boat. Their culture, you can see it's surrounded by water. That determines their culture. A lot of seafaring. They had traveled all over Europe, and they traveled quite extensively by boat, including eventually the rumor had there was there were these oral histories passed down through generations and generations that some of the Vikings had actually reached this magical land called Vinland, Vinland, and no one was quite sure where it was, but historians speculated that maybe it was North America. And you can see it wouldn't have been super um, crazy if they had done that. Now, this is a recreation of a Viking ship. And a few of these Viking ships have actually been found intact in European places. But this one's a recreation showing how they would travel. So, anyways, way back, these are some early Viking voyages from the land of Scandinavia, Norway, etc., Finland. And early voyages, they had traveled as far as Iceland, which we know is not made up of ice. It's actually a nice climate there. I've never been there myself, but I'd like to someday. And then in 985, the Eric the Red. Eric the Red sails to Greenland, which is basically a large sheet of ice and very cold. Now they establish a colony in Greenland, and a few years later, in the year 1000, Eric's son Leif, Eric the Red's son Leif, Eric's son, travels even further, and you see they never venture too far directly out to sea. They travel along the coasts, and they end up way down here in North America. Now, this, as I said, there was a lot of stories that this had happened, but there was no real evidence until the 1960s. I believe the year was 1968. I may be wrong on that, but archaeologists in what is now part of Canada, up here in Newfoundland, they they dig up some artifacts and they date them, and they realize that these are Viking artifacts, that the Vikings had in fact been there. And research has indicated that they probably lived there. Vikings, they had a colony there. They had a establishment, a village for between 50 to 100 years probably. They stuck around for quite a while. This is a recreation of what they think that the village may have looked like. All right, but the Vikings never really become as well known as Christopher Columbus. We do not have Leif Erikson Day because they didn't have the lasting effect that Columbus did. So before 1492, still about 500 years before Columbus, Vikings led by Leif Erikson traveled to Vinland. And for filling in your notes, which I will give you a chance to in a second as well, but the underlined words are what you're writing in there. This is considered less important than Columbus because unlike Columbus's voyage completely changes the world. The world before 1492 and after 1492 is a drastic change. The Vikings had less lasting impact on the world. They came, they stayed here for quite a while, longer than Columbus. They went back, for whatever reason, we don't know exactly why they abandoned it or if they died or what happened to their settlement here in North America. But basically, life went on. Life in Europe went on. Not many people even knew about what the Vikings had done. It wasn't a secret, but not many people knew about it. People in Asia, Africa, North America, nothing really changed as a result of the Vikings voyage. Whereas Columbus, when he makes his voyage, the whole world will change. Africa, Asia, Europe, Americas, it's going to really shake up the world. With the Vikings, not so much. So this would be a time if you want to fill in the notes and pause. So pause, you can fill in the notes. I will wait for you. Hopefully you can read my handwriting. I'm just looking to see if there's anything that's really hard to read here. I don't think there is. Hopefully you can figure it all out. Okay, I will assume you're back now. You've paused, you've unpaused, and now you're back. So moving on, Christopher Columbus. So Christopher Columbus was a well-known, I mean, he was considered the best sailor, best navigator in the world at that time. Now, people at this time still did not venture out into the Atlantic Ocean very often because it was too dangerous. This is actually a few artifacts that exist. This is a book of Marco Polo's journeys, the travels of Marco Polo, written in Latin. And this is Christopher Columbus's personal copy of it, in which he wrote notes in the sides. So he had studied the works of Marco Polo. He had read about China and India and Japan. So he wanted to get there. And he thought, I know how we can get there. And he draws a map, and he has this wild idea that he could sail to the west across the vast ocean sea and reach China, India, and Japan. He could reach Asia, which was to the east of Europe, by sailing west. Now, this is a map that Columbus drew in 1490. Remember, 1492 is the big year. So this is before. This is while he's planning his voyage. And it's really hard to see too much here. It's a little easier when we're on the big screen. But if you look sort of carefully here, you can see this is the outline of Africa. This would be Europe up here. Right here is Spain. This would be the Mediterranean Sea. And he's aiming to get over here somewhere by sailing westward around the world. Now, so just to give you an idea again, here's the Mediterranean Sea, Africa, Europe. There's Spain. And over here are the Spice Islands. We're not sure exactly which ones he was talking about here, but this is where things like cinnamon, vanilla, all kinds of spices came from. And what Columbus thinks he can do is sail around the world and come out over here. Now, people from Portugal were also trying to find a water route to Asia, and they did find a way by going down around Africa and across the Indian Ocean to reach Asia that way. The problem is they're going to control this route. So Spain decides they want a route of their own. So they think, okay, we'll take a chance with Columbus. We are going to sail west around the world and come out the other side. Perfect plan, except for Columbus had made a few miscalculations. One is he did not know that there was this big barrier of land, this big North and South America, what we call North and South America. They did not know, nobody in Europe knew that this even existed. They thought it was going to be smooth sailing all the way around the world. The water route just would be going around. But then when they run into land here, it's going to block the way, kind of, although they don't realize that for a while. So Columbus convinces King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella to finance his journey after being turned down by his own country, or his own kingdoms of Genoa in Italy. He ends up going to Spain. Spain agrees to finance it. They provide him with 3 ships, the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria. These are recreations of those ships, but I do have a picture of the actual ships right there. The Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria, the famous Columbus ships. All right, and they set sail. I'm just checking my time. I'm taking longer than I wanted here. I'm going to try to speed things up by talking faster. No, but I just won't go quite as far as I had hoped today. So Columbus, born in Italy, but was sponsored by Spain. So he is going to be working for Spain, basically. They're paying for the trip, so everything he does is for Spain. He has 3 ships, the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria. and he has a crew of about 90 men divided among those three ships. They set sail in August. You don't need to know these dates. This is just information for you. Set sail on August 2nd, 1492. They sail, and the story goes, now Columbus's stories kind of make him seem like the hero, but other people actually did publish some primary sources as well, which make Columbus seem maybe not like such a great guy. But Columbus makes himself sound like a great guy, so that's okay. He set sail in August. They sail August, September, October. They're really not sure where they are. They're lost. His men are ready to have a mutiny, which means take over the ship and sail back. He agrees. He tries to convince them to give him a few more days, and they promises a reward. The king of Spain had offered a reward to the first person of this 90-man crew to spot land, and the reward, I don't know exactly how much it was. Maybe it was just a nice imaginary gold star. Maybe it was money. It was money. I don't know how much though. Anyways, in at 2 a.m. on October 12th, 1492, October 12th traditionally has been Columbus Day. Somebody up in the crow's nest spots land, and they yell "Tierra, tierra, tierra," which means land, land, land. Now, that person, instead of being entitled to the prize money, Columbus says, "Oh, yeah, that land, I knew about that. I saw that yesterday. I just didn't say anything." So Columbus keeps the prize money for himself. But they do spot land, and they have reached India. They have sailed all the way around the world. At least they've reached the islands off of India, the Indies. They've sailed all the way around the world, made it to the Spice Islands, or made it to India, Africa, China. I'm sorry. India, Asia. They've made it to Asia as far as he knows, and as far as the crew knows. That's what they think. Now, this is the problem, though. Columbus had miscalculated in his calculations about the size of the Earth. He basically figured the Earth was like maybe the size of a softball, when in fact, the world is the size of a soccer ball. Note, the Earth is actually larger than a soccer ball. All right, but this is just a comparison. It may not be a mathematically correct comparison, but it's just making the point that Columbus had thought it was possible to sail around the world, and it is possible in a way if there hadn't been those islands being North and South America, the continent blocking the way. But the world was much larger, which if it had not been for North and South America, if it had just been ocean the entire way, Columbus and his men probably would have died at sea because they would never have survived such a long journey. But Columbus doesn't know that. He reaches these islands down here, the Caribbean, the Bahamas, whatever you want to call these islands, or the West Indies, as they are sometimes called. He reaches these islands, he sails around, he goes ashore, he meets native people, the Taínos people. We'll talk about them more tomorrow. We don't have time today. He claims the land in the name of God. He's spreading his Christian Roman Catholic religion, and in the name of the King and Queen of Spain. And he writes about what great slaves these people would make. Now, he thinks he is over here in Asia, and as far as everyone knows, Columbus, even though he'll make more journeys to what he thinks are the Spice Islands, he does not actually ever reach that, and he dies thinking that he has sailed around the world. In fact, he has not sailed around the world. He has, quote, discovered America, even though you may notice he never reaches North America, where the United States will be. He reaches the islands down here and touches on South America, Cuba, but never reaches North America, never reaches the Spice Islands. But he still is going to change the world. So I'll give you a chance to fill in the notes again here. You can pause it. You don't need to listen to me say this, but let me just read. He was from Italy, but was working for Spain. Left on 3 ships, the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria, 90 men, on a voyage west. This is important. He was sailing west in search of a water route to Asia. That's what they were looking for, a water route to Asia, to reach there by sea, so that traders could avoid the slow, dangerous land route known as the Silk Road. No Europeans had learned about silks and spices during the religious wars known as the Crusades. Land travel was slow, costly, dangerous, etc. 1492, Europeans knew the world was round. They didn't know it was so large, and were not aware that the Americas, North and South America, even existed. After 5 weeks, they landed in Hispaniola. I believe the pronunciation is an island. We're not sure which exactly island for sure. We know which one historians think it was. It's in the Bahamas. He believed he had reached India, so he called the native people Indians. When he returned to Spain, news of his discovery is going to set off an explosion of exploration by other European nations motivated by the three G's of gold, God, and glory, which we will talk about another day. The Columbus documentary we don't have time for right now, but maybe I'll post that for you. Okay, sorry that was a bit long. Let me just get out of here.